What is there? Hu ushmo bilvad. God and his name, which means revelation, infinite light, and that's it. Last week I gave you a whole thing with pages of different maps of the cosmos. We did that last week. In the beginning, there's only infinite light. That's it. Well, God and his infinite light, the infinite presence of God, essentially. Only God. What happens, day one of creation, the anniversary of which is tonight, not Rosh Hashanah, but tonight, is God hides that essence, God hides the infinite light, and produces a limited, not a limited run, I don't mean to make it exclusive, but a limited, maybe it's also exclusive. How many worlds, how many universes do we know about? All right, that's a loaded question. I don't know, I'm not a physicist. But anyway, look, astronomer, getting back to the point, God creates a limited environment, and that's what we know of as creation. That's what we know of as creation. A limited environment, and God creates the world. Bereshit, I've said this many times. You've heard me say this many times. Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, who creates? God. But what's the name of God in the Bible and the Torah that's used in the beginning of the Bible for creation? It's Elokim, which is the divine name of limitation and constraint and concealment and darkness. Creation is a product of divine concealment. It's hiding now. It's hiding in order to create a finite world that can stand up on its own 2 feet. I get it. It's for a good cause. It's for a good purpose. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, relative to the infinite that was prior, you can't compare. You had infinite divine light. You had the infinite presence of God. And now what do you have? A globe. A limited place with limited creatures, subject by time and space. All right. Listen, you didn't have it before. So you got something new. It's always nice to have something new, right? We're always looking forward to new things. But at the end of the day, it's a massive, it's a quantum leap, that usually assumes something higher, but this is lower, step down from the infinite. Are you with me so far? Yes? That's not something to celebrate. We don't make Rosh Hashanah for that. Sorry. If you thought Rosh Hashanah was the anniversary of creation, I'm here to be that guy. I'm here to do the spoiler alert. It's not the anniversary of creation. It's not. We say it in the prayers on Rosh Hashanah, by the way, but that's not what it means. It's not the anniversary of creation, straight up. It's the anniversary of day number 6 of creation, the day that Adam and Eve stroll onto the scene with dimmed lights, rock music, and smoke machines. Okay, fine, maybe that's not exactly how it happened. It's when Adam and Eve stroll onto the scene, right, with heavy metal guitars playing in the background, and they walk in like a boss because now they've arrived, and now the job can start getting done. What's the job? So listen to this. The purpose of humankind, despite what anyone else will ever tell you, the purpose of humankind is a very simple, not easy, simple thing. And that is, listen to this, bring back the infinite light into this finite space. Pencil drop. That's it. Infinite light in a finite space. Let me unpack that and explain. Kabbalah says that before, and I said this already before this morning, Kabbalah says that before creation, BC, there was only God and his infinite light. But what I didn't say this morning, but I've said it other times, is that in that space of infinite presence of God, nothing else can exist. If God's taken up all the space of the room, no one else can fit in the room. Are you with me on that? Yes? And when I say room, I mean infinite expanse of space. Beyond space, right? If God is infinitely present, nothing else can emerge, which is why there was the simpson harisha, why there was the first contraction to allow, God contracts, so to speak, to allow space for otherness, us, to exist, or the world creation to exist. Because if God is everywhere, then nothing else can be. It's not just a spatial thing, by the way. It's not just, if a car is, car's a weird example. Whatever. If something's filling a certain space, then you can't put something else in that space. The laws of physics. Yes, that's also true, but it's also conceptual. It's not just quantitative. It's also qualitative. When you're talking about an infinite presence of God, nothing finite can exist within that infinite presence without dissolving into that infinite space. In other words, a finite being cannot retain its own dimensions, its own limitations inside the infinite space. Encountering the infinite truth, the finite will dissolve immediately into that infinite space and drop its dimensionality, drop its particularity, drop its contours, and cease to be. It's almost like Kabbalah says, if you take a small fire, if you take like a candle, and you hold it near a bonfire, the flame will actually jump from the candle to the bonfire. The small fire, the particular fire, is going to jump to the larger fire, to become dissolved in the larger experience, the larger flame. The same thing is true. The same thing is true with infinite and finite. In a space of infinite, finite can't exist. Number one, infinite takes up all the space, but more than just the technicality. In a space of infinite, in the face of the infinite presence of God, nothing can exist and say, I am I, as a finite being. Because that's what finite beings say. Finite beings are finite because they say, I am I. Because if they don't say that, then you say, so who are you? Right? I am I means I am a particular finite being that is not someone else, something else. I'm here, not there. Those are the contours and definitions of a finite being. Are you with me so far? Does this make sense what I'm saying so far? Yes? A finite being in an infinite, in the presence of the infinite God, dissolves and loses its finitude or finiteness, whatever you want to call it, and therefore ceases to be. Thus, all you have again is the infinite. Therefore, you cannot have finite existence emerging in the space of the infinite presence of God. Therefore, the simpson, that original contraction, was necessary in order to contract, conceal, hide, remove, so to speak, at least vis-a-vis us, God's presence, God's infinite presence, to allow for the emergence of finite being. So it's not just giving space, it's also giving a qualitative context for a creation to emerge. Because in the space of God's infinite presence, who can emerge as a finite being and hold on to their identity without letting go? But when there's a tzimtzum, when there's a concealment, when that light, that infinite presence of God is concealed to some extent, then now you can have finite being emerge. That's the secret. All of this is the secret of the original tzimtzum. It's the secret of darkness. Now, this is also the secret and the energy of day one of creation. This is all what happens tonight. First tzimtzum, first concealment, first contraction, the emergence of finite being, the emergence of everything. It says in Kabbalah, listen to this, that on day one of creation, it wasn't just heaven and earth or light and darkness as we read about in the Torah. It was also, in the Kabbalistic understanding, every single thing that we talk about in Kabbalah. The 10 Sfirot energies, the different worlds, the highest world, the Ein Sof, the infinite worlds, all the entire schematic, the entire scheme of creation emerges into being on day number one of creation, which again is tonight, the anniversary of which is tonight. But here's the wild thing. The wild thing is, after that happens, what do you have? You have a finite world. You have finite creation, finite beings, finite reality, limited reality. So it's nice, you got something new, but that's not something to write home about. That's not something necessarily to create a holiday of Rosh Hashanah about. What is Rosh Hashanah? Day number 6. Adam and Eve, human beings on the scene. And what's our tafkid? What's our role? What's our tachlit? What's our purpose? It's to bring down the original, the OG infinite light into finite space. It's about bringing that original light that is absolutely a contradiction to finite existence. It's somehow smuggling that light into our space to have the convergence of the infinite light and the finite space. In other words, to integrate the infinite inside the finite, but this time the finite remains standing. Before creation, only the infinite could stand, and it was a zero. It's like a binary type approach. It's one or the other. It's either one or the. It can't be both. Either the infinite is present and no finite, or the infinite has to hide so that the finite can emerge. What our role is, and I said before, it's a simple idea, not easy, but simple, i.e. straightforward. Our purpose of being is simply to integrate the infinite and the finite, to bring down, to draw forth, summon forth that original infinite light, but this time into our finite space. The infinite is as strong as it was. The finite is as defined as it is. But this time, unlike the way it was originally, this time there can be an integration. Now you're wondering like this, well, how's that possible? The infinite and the finite sound like a contradiction. And that's why there had to be a simpson, because they couldn't exist. This town ain't big enough for the both of us in spaghetti Western parlance, right? Can't have both. You can't have infinite and finite. It's only one king can wear this crown. Two kings can't wear the crown. So how do we pull that off? Herein lies the secret to Torah and mitzvot. When we study Torah, when we do mitzvot, when we act like a mensch, essentially, when we do all of the things that Torah demands from us, or nicely asks of us to do, right? That is a way to bring down the infinite inside the finite. Why? Because God has allowed the infinite to be present in these finite actions. So, for example, on Rosh Hashanah, let's just stick with Rosh Hashanah. The mitzvah of the day on Rosh Hashanah. There's one mitzvah, right? What's the mitzvah? To hear the sounding of the chauffeur. That's the mitzvah of the day of Rosh Hashanah. To hear the sounding of the chauffeur. Yes, obviously there are prayers and there are resolutions and all these wonderful things. But the mitzvah of the day is to hear the chauffeur. So on Rosh Hashanah, when we sound the shofar, when we hear the shofar, we are integrating a cosmic, an infinite energy, an infinite light inside a finite reality. We're bringing down the infinite light, God's infinite light, because Torah mitzvot are coming from God's infinite essence, and we're integrating it into our physical world, utilizing a physical ram's horn, utilizing physical breath, listening to it with our physical ears. So all of the magic of the mitzvah, which is the magic of the infinite light of God, is coming down into a physical space. The same thing is true when we build a sukkah. We build a hut and we eat something in it, or when we take the lulav and the esrog and the hadas and the rav, the 4 kinds on Sukkot, and hold them together and shake, then say a blessing and give them a shake. The same thing happens every time we do a mitzvah, lighting Shabbat candles, wrapping tefillin, giving tzedakah, whatever the mitzvah is. When we do a mitzvah, we're drawing forth, we're summoning forth the infinite light into the finite space, and that constitutes the totality of the purpose of being. The purpose of existence is to have the best of both worlds, both states of reality, to have the infinite essence, the infinite light, integrated with a finite, in a finite environment. This speaks to the power of human beings and to the power of life on earth, which sometimes perhaps we can take for granted. What is the true beauty of life on earth? When I say life on earth, I mean life as we know it now. The soul is always alive, right? The soul is always alive. Souls don't die. Souls can't die because they are part of God. So just as God cannot die, right? God just is, a soul also just is. The example that I've used before is like the refrigerator that talks to the electricity and says, what happens when we're unplugged? The electricity says, I don't know about you, but I'm not going anywhere, right? Electricity is still around in the walls. If the refrigerator is plugged in or not, that's with the refrigerator. That's like Is it going to be plugged in and make noise, a little bit, a buzzing sound, and cool off the food? That's up to the refrigerator. Electricity is not going anywhere. So too with body and soul, right? What happens when a person passes away is that the soul continues to live on. The body is no longer being enlivened by the soul, but the soul absolutely lives on. But what is the significance of soul in a body here on earth? Life as we know it right now, this state of life, life as seen through our physical eyes, through our bodily lens. What is the significance of this life? So the Kabbalah say that this life, on one level, is greater, is loftier than the experience of the life of the soul before or after this life. Remember, souls exist before this journey, and they exist after this journey. But what is this journey, and what does this journey accomplish that the souls or angels cannot accomplish? It's this integration of infinite and finite. Because we down here in this physical space, can draw from the Torah and mitzvot and plug it in to something of the physical world. To take a mitzvah, sounding the chauffeur, and actually use a physical ram's horn and breath and sound waves and eardrums to, or whatever it is, and ears, to listen, to do the mitzvah, to fulfill the mitzvah of listening to the chauffeur. This is what we can do here on earth. We can draw the infinite into the finite, and that constitutes the purpose of being. So, what is Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah is not what we normally think. Rosh Hashanah is not the anniversary of creation. That's not what it is. Because it's 6 days off. If that's what it's supposed to be, someone got the day wrong. Someone got the dates wrong. It's never been meant to be the beginning, the anniversary of creation. Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of the purpose of creation. And that's very different. Rosh Hashanah is not the anniversary of the simpson. We're not celebrating the darkness. We're not celebrating the space. We're not celebrating the finite. Rosh Hashanah is a celebration of the beginning of Adam and Eve and the beginning of the opportunity to heal the darkness, to heal the finite, to integrate the infinite with the finite, to bring the infinite light back where it was, but this time integrated and merged with that finite space. That's what Rosh Hashanah is. That's what Adam and Eve started. That's our legacy, our purpose, our mission, to bring the infinite inside the finite. In the language of Kabbalah, and this is something that I think many of you will be familiar with, this type of terminology. The lights of Tohu and the vessels of Tikkun. I'll say that again. We're meant to bring the lights of Tohu inside the vessels of Tikkun. And let me unpack that statement. There are two realms. Tohu is that infinite, the realm of infinite light, volatile, in which there was a shattering of the vessels. Tikkun is the world of repair, which is a limited world, the world that's created post-Simpson, a world of order, but that has limited light. And the goal, our mission in life, is to integrate both extremes. The infinite light of Tohu, of chaos, inside the orderly space. The order, the orderliness of Tikkun, of the world of repair. The infinite lights into the finite spaces. If I were to give you marching orders from this idea, if we were to talk about, okay, practically, what does that mean? What does that look like for us in our lives? Sounds lofty. So I already gave you a practical understanding of it. It means every time we do a mitzvah, or study Torah, what we're doing is bring down the infinite light into a finite space. But what does that look like on a behavioral level? I want to give you an example. And I'm giving this example only so that these concepts that might sound theoretical have a practical, you have a hook that you can understand it really like in a tangible way. You have people that live in a very wild way, right? People that live on the edge and live wild and live, and I'm not defining what I mean by wild, because it could take on many different forms. But people that don't have Seder. You know what Seder is? Like on Passover, we have a Seder. It's an order. People that don't live in the rules. They don't live in the Seder. They don't wake up in the morning, this, that. They live great. They live like expansive and broad and not following the norms of the rules, if you will. Right? Live in a wild way. A lot of energy. Sometimes very chaotic energy. And then you have people that live very orderly, very masudder, very organized and very orderly and very very calculated. I need to do this, I need to do that, and everything is organized. I wake up at this time and I eat that time and I go to sleep at that time, and everything is organized. And I know I'm giving you kind of like two extremes, but I'm just trying to highlight the distinction. You have like no rules, just, and then you have the rules. Now typically the energy, and I don't know how you define energy, I know how I define it in my head and in my heart right now. The way I'm trying to express it, I'm hoping it's coming through. I don't know that I can give you like a dictionary definition of the word that I'm using right now, i.e. energy. But the energy of the person, of the wild person, is much greater than the energy of the organized, the masudder, the one who's very much living by the order. Yes, you're with me so far on this? Yeah? There's an energy there. So what are we talking about? Again, if we were to very much limit it into this type of example, it would be channeling the energy of that person who's living that wild life into the orderliness, into the seder, into the definition of an orderly life, but to have the same intensity. So maybe give you an example like this. Good morning, princess. How's it going? Hey, Riva. You want to say hi? No, you're davening? So beautiful. Okay, she's got her siddur. Many people when they were young, they had all sorts of ideas. Yeah, changing the world. Oh, it's going to be revolution, right? What's that song? It's going to be a revolution, right? It's the revolution and change, and everything's going to be different, and shatter the constructs of everything. It's going to be like, because when we're young, we have so much energy. You know what they say? Why is youth wasted on the young, right? When we're young, by the way, I'm not to say that somebody can't be older and have that same energy. I'm giving you a scenario, which I think is somewhat of a scenario that oh, hey you. Hey Ellie. Good morning. Wait, hold on. Let me move back so you can get on. I'm just giving you a scenario that has repeated itself throughout history. You have people that are young, and when they're young, all of the energy, untapped energy, raw energy, all hours of the night, planning and all sorts of things. Then you get a little bit older, and what happens? You have lots of energy, Ellie? There you go. Look at this guy. Come on. There you go. He's got the energy. He's a young man. How old are you now? 6 years old. Tons of energy. So, yeah, tons of energy. I don't only mean 6, by the way. Also a little bit older, right? Tons of energy, but not only physical energy. I mean, perspective, change. It's going to be shatter all of the things, all the ills of the world. We're going to heal everything. We're going to fix everything. Such optimism and just tear everything down and rebuild it in a beautiful way. And then what happens? We get older. And what happens when we get older? Again, I'm not speaking about any specific person. I'm just giving you a general, life cycle type thing. What happens? Oftentimes, we get older, and I'm going to say a dirty word. We settle down. We get settled, right? It's like, oh, we get the job, we get the house, we get the car, we get the family, everything. We settle down, right? And we find order. And what happens to all of the energy, all of the change that we were going to bring about, all of the dynamic, disruption? I don't know, but I got to get up early in the morning, so I go to sleep. I got to go to work. I got to put food on the table, so I got to get up. Got to get up at 6. Got to daven. Got to get to work on time. Gotta get back home. I gotta make a living. I gotta do my stuff. So maybe someone else is gonna fix the world. I don't know, but like all that stuff, all that chaotic energy, all that chaotic energy, you know, who has time for that anymore? So we settle in and we settle down. Again, you have people that grew up that still maintain that energy. You have people that are young that were always calculated, right? Even when they were a kid, they were masuder. It's not a judgment. It's nothing. I'm just giving you a scenario, giving you a way to understand these concepts of infinite and finite and the bridge between the two. How amazing would it be? How incredible would it be to channel the same energy, the same revolutionary energy, the same infinite, audacious energy of youth, and have that infuse and inform our orderly life, so that even when we're doing the orderly things, the seder of life, even as we're, living an organized life, it's still infused, it's still informed by that energy that we had. I'm not saying that's what this is, but that would be a parallel or an example, a human way of understanding about bridging infinite and finite. So there's a way to look at it where you say, look, the two are opposites and they cannot coexist. If you have infinite, you cannot have finite. If you have finite, you cannot have infinite. So choose which one you want, but you're only going to have one. Each one has advantages and disadvantages, right? Light or vessel, right? Each one has its advantages. Big light or big vessels. Big light is infinite energy. Big vessels means lots of orderliness, right? Sustainability, if you will. So each one has its advantage. Choose one. But on a deeper level, there's a way to get the advantages of both. That's a very lofty level. In the world, in a spiritual context, this means the idea of drawing the infinite light, the light that preceded the simpson, the light that had to be hidden away, so to speak, in order for creation to emerge. Let's bring that back into the finite constraints, finite structure of hishtalshut, of creation. And how does that happen? Like as I mentioned before, happens through Torah mitzvot. And who does that? Who pulls that off? Human beings. Human beings are uniquely trusted with this mission, not because we're better than anything in creation, but just because everything is created for a certain purpose. Happens to be the purpose of human beings is to achieve this type of bridge between the infinite light and the finite space. So that's why day number 6 of creation, Adam and Eve's emergence, is so significant. It's when creation really, it's when the purpose really began. So what is Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah is not the day of the celebration or the anniversary, the remembrance of creation itself. It's a day in which we remind ourselves of what we're here for and what we're here to do, which is very significant. Because when we think about Rosh Hashanah in the context of taking resolutions, New Year's resolutions, like what is this year going to look like for me? It's not like, how can I make this world darker or more limited? No. The resolutions of Rosh Hashanah are all about, how do I bring more infinite light into this finite space? How do I bring more of God's light into this finite space that all too often looks a little too dark and gloomy? How do I bring more joy? Right? We have 3 times joy this morning, right here amongst us. Right? 3 joys. How do I bring more joy into a world that all too often is a little bit sad? How do I bring more light into my life? How do I bring more godliness into what sometimes feels like a godless world? How do I bring more purpose into a world that oftentimes seems so aimless and purposeless? Purposeless. I think I said that right. Yeah? That's the resolution of Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah is not about the tzimtzum. Rosh Hashanah is about overriding the simpson. It's undoing the simpson, undoing the gulf between infinite and finite, and leaking the light. Leaking the light inside our space. Don't worry, it's not going to blow up. It's not going to blow up. Before it would have blown, it would have precluded the possibility to exist. This is the impossible math of the Kabbalists. Infinite and finite cannot coexist. For finite to exist, infinite has to go away. But once finite exists, infinite can be drawn into finite. That's the impossible math. That's the math of the Kabbalists. That's our job. Does that make sense what I just said? Yes? Make sense? I'm getting some nods. Okay, let me pause here. Questions or comments on what I said up until now about Rosh Hashanah, day 6 versus day 1, simpson concealment, finite versus bridging the gap, which is our job, which is Rosh Hashanah. Questions, comments?
Great. It's very clear, and I love the idea that we celebrate the human being like in this world.
Amazing. Okay, good. I'm glad it's coming across clear. That's exactly what we're celebrating. We're celebrating our emergence, our coming into being. It's not narcissistic. It's not about ego. It's like patting ourselves on the back. No. It's actually a call to action. Rosh Hashanah is actually, it's really a look in the mirror to say, wait a second. Am I part of the problem or part of the solution? Am I furthering the simpson, contraction, concealment of God's infinite light? Am I like keeping the dark narrative? Or am I a light spreader? Right? Or am I somebody who is bringing light, pouring light into this world? And don't worry, you're not going to blow it up. We're not going to blow it up, right? It's going to be sustainable. How is it sustainable? Okay, this gets into other Kabbalistic secrets, the idea of the power of Torah, mitzvot. I alluded to it before when I said that God has because God, there are no limitations on God. God could even figure out a way how to compress the infinite into the finite, or allow for us to do that, to choose that, and for that to happen. Now you might ask, so then why was there a need for a simpson to begin with? If God can do the impossible, so then create a finite world without a simpson? It's a good question. Ultimately, we don't know. But the process is that first there had to be a simpson. It had to make sense logically. You first have to withdraw the infinite light to have finite environment. But once that's done, and now we have a finite environment, now we can, within the sustainable environment, bring back down the infinite light. This is the meaning of Zeh Hayom Techilat Ma'asecha. Today, Rosh Hashanah, when we say in the prayers on Rosh Hashanah in the prayer books, today, Rosh Hashanah, is the day of the beginning of your works of creation, God. It's not the beginning of the beginning, but it's the beginning of getting the job done. It's not the beginning of the tzimtzum. It's beginning the healing of the tzimtzum. It's beginning the healing of the absence of light and bringing back the light back into this space where it was from the beginning. And the truth is, as Kabbalah explains, the light never really went anywhere. It's just for us, we didn't see it. And this takes me to the next step. And I want to use the example of a riddle, which is a very important example. Again, I'm giving you... Okay, let's talk about riddles. I'm not going to give you a riddle, although maybe I should. But I don't have any riddles that come to mind immediately. So we're going to have to talk about riddles as a theory as opposed to me giving you a riddle. So let's say I gave you a riddle. Let's say, because I'm not actually, but let's say I gave you a riddle. Yeah? And it's like a few lines, and it's like a puzzle. And it ends with, who am I? It says, I'm this, and that, who am I? And now you're like reading it, like, I don't know. It's confusing, it's complicated. It could be a few things. You have questions what the solution is. Okay. And then eventually you come up with the answer. Maybe it's the wrong answer. Then you try again. Eventually you get the right answer. So for the recipient of the riddle, the first perspective is confusion. And then ultimately, hopefully, if all goes well, there's clarity. Are you with me on that? When you first get a riddle and you read it, your first response is, what does this mean? That's confusion, lack of clarity. And then when you solve it, you have clarity. It's like any puzzle, right? You get a puzzle. The first thing is confusion. And then hopefully you get to solve it and you get clarity. In the context of light and darkness, if we were to put the way Kabbalah explains light and darkness, right? It's not literal light and darkness, but it's conceptual light and darkness. We start off grappling in the darkness, and then we get to the place of light. We start off in the place of darkness / confusion, not knowing, not seeing the solution, and then we get to the solution, which is the light. We get to that clarity. Okay. But here's the big idea. Think about the one who made the riddle, the author of the riddle. You with me? The one who wrote the riddle down and gave it to you. Did they have any moment of darkness? Did they have any moment of uncertainty what the solution was? Did they not know the answer at any point in time? Of course not. The one who wrote the riddle, knew the answer from the beginning. They wrote a riddle to hide the answer, to make it hard for you to find. But that's for you. For them, they knew it all the way through. Are you with me? Does what I'm saying make sense? They were thinking of the solution the whole time, right? And then they thought of a way to hide the solution in 3 lines of text that will kind of hint, but also hide to who we're talking about. Then presents it to the other person. The other person eventually, after a bunch of tries, finds the solution. They get that aha moment. Oh, I got it. And they come up with the answer. But you, let's say you're the one that wrote it up. You always had the answer. In fact, there was never a question. So, I hope that makes sense. It's like a crossword puzzle you're trying to figure out. The author of the crossword puzzle never had a question what 39 down is. It was never a question. Why? Because they know what it is. It's not like they figured it out first. It starts off the other way, with the solution, and then they created the problem for you, not for them. Are you with me? Okay. Crossword puzzles. Let's talk. I know I'm in the middle of a point here, and there's an analog that's powerful. But let's talk about crossword puzzles for a second. So I actually really enjoy looking at crossword puzzles. But I don't think I've ever done this. I don't think I've ever taken a pen or pencil and actually filled out a crossword puzzle. And I wonder now, as I'm talking about crossword puzzles, like why that is. And I'm thinking maybe it's because sometimes I encounter them on Shabbos. But also, maybe I just don't have a pen or pencil around when I'm looking at them, even if it's not. And maybe I just don't want to be committed to to the whole experience. But I love figuring out a lot of them or some of them and convincing myself, yeah, I would totally be able to knock out the rest of them. Which may or may not be true, but I wouldn't know because I don't actually go through the whole thing. Any crossword puzzle aficionados? Anyone who loves crossword puzzles and knocks them out? Anybody? Okay, so we're all in the same boat. Good. Getting back to the idea here. What's the payoff here? What's the point? You ready? The simpson only hides God for us. The simpson never hid God from himself. Are you with me on that? The simpson, that contraction of light, so-called contraction, that withdrawal of light, so to speak. I feel like I should say withdrawal with a southern drawl. No. That withdrawal of light, of infinite light, to create a finite space, that was never concealed or withdrawn vis-a-vis God. When the author of the riddle writes a riddle, composes the riddle, hiding the subject inside 3 lines of text of riddle text, that subject, the answer, was never at any point in time hidden, concealed, or a question mark to the author. It was always known. When the author looks at the riddle, he or she doesn't even see the riddle, but rather sees the solution all the way through. The riddle is transparent to the truth. Are you with me? There's complete transparency. To God, this is very important. To God, the simpson never changed a thing. The simpson is only a simpson, and I'm using the Hebrew word here, the Kabbalistic word simpson, which means contraction. Right? I'm actually going to write it in the chat just so everybody sees it. Simpson. That's in English. Hebrew would look differently. Obviously. Hebrew would look like Simsum. Okay? Hebrew, English and Hebrew. So that Simsum is not a Simsum to God. It's like the riddle is not a riddle to the author of the riddle. The crossword puzzle is not a crossword puzzle to the one who's making the crossword puzzle. It's not that it's not a challenge. It's that there's no concealment for the author of the concealment. Are you with me? It's a little bit hard, I think, to articulate the full extent of how not concealed it ever is to God himself, or to the infinite. To the infinite, to the Ein Sof, there's never a state of tzimtzum, never a state of concealment. We talk about tzimtzum and siluk, the light was removed and it was, withdrawn, and there was a makampana, an empty space, and that's where finite existence emerges. And all of that, the entire conversation is for us, not for God. The entire conversation about tzimtzum, contraction, concealment, withdrawal, empty space, all of that is for us, not for God. God creates that for us. God is never not present. God is only hiding himself from us so that we feel our own definition and contours, which means connecting these 2 points. I hope that last point made sense. Again, I'm just saying it one more time. I know I've said it like a bunch of times, so make sure it's like set in our brains before I connect now these 2 ideas. The author of the riddle, holding up the riddle, he or she will not see the confusion, but will see the clarity. There's never confusion for the author of the riddle. Getting back and connecting both points. What this means is, in the created space, in our created space, which is a finite space. In the beginning, Elohim created, right? Finite space. Finite space. Simpson space. Day one creation. In truth, the infinite light is always there. In truth, the infinite light never went anywhere else. The infinite light never truly disappeared. It never truly was withdrawn objectively. It never truly emptied out from that space. It was always there. It's just that for us, created beings, we don't see it. We don't see the light. It's a riddle for us. So what's our job to connect these 2 ideas now and to create a full package? What happens on day 6 of creation? Human beings emerge. And what's our job? Our job is to reveal the truth that's been lying here the whole time. That's been present the entire time. And what is that truth that's been around the whole time? It's that there's an infinite light right here. It's hiding in plain sight. You can't even see it, but it's right here. It's like the solution to the riddle. It's not somewhere else. It's not, in another realm of existence. It's right in these words. It's just you can't see it yet, or I can't see it yet. The author can see it from the beginning. The riddle author sees it the whole time. It's just you and I, who are the recipients of the riddle, we don't see it. And then we think, when we solved it, look what I created. Something new, a new answer. It's not a new answer. It was embedded in the words the whole time. Just we didn't see it. The infinite light of God is, and this is like the deepest secret of all. The infinite light of God is always here. The simpson is our perception. We don't see it. So for us, it appears as though God has withdrawn, God is hidden, etc. This is the majesty or the majestic understanding of tzimtzum lo kipshuto, something that the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, was very vehement in teaching, that tzimtzum is not literal. There were others who believed that the tzimtzum, we've talked about this before, we talked about this when we had classes on the second part of Tanya. In Sharich Ve'emunah, we talked about different levels. There are actually 4 different understandings of tzimtzum, a massive debate and conversation amongst the Kabbalists of how to understand tzimtzum. This is not the platform right now this morning to get into all 4 nuanced understandings of tzimtzum. But here's the point, here's the bottom line. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, taught forcefully and made sure to put it out there that tzimtzum lo, and based on, of course, not his own ideas, but based on ancient ideas with tzimtzum, that tzimtzum is not a literal concealment. Sorry, not a literal contraction or a literal absence of the light. Tzimtzum is only our perception, which means, again, that inside our finite environment, inside our finite space, is the infinite light this whole time. It's just that sometimes we don't see it. It's just that sometimes, not sometimes, most of the time, we can't discern it. It's not obvious to us. It's something that we see other stuff. We see finite, we see limitation, we see world, we see physicality, we see materialism. We don't see the infinite, and so we think it's not here. So what is Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah is the day in which we reveal the truth. Yes, yes. As David says beautifully in the chat, Rosh Hashanah is a time that we remind ourselves we have to remove our own filters. It's our own filtered lenses that don't allow us to see the truth. The truth, the infinite light of God, the infinite presence of God is right here. It's right here. It's not anywhere else. It's right here. We don't see it. Okay. So our job is to see it, to open our eyes up. How do we open our eyes up to the truth? Torah and mitzvot. That's how we do it. And that's Rosh Hashanah. So all of this is a meditation for this week. As we have now a little bit under a week, but we now have, today's Sunday. We now have pretty much, a full Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday till Friday night. We have to get ourselves ready for Rosh Hashanah. So what's the energy? What's the theme? The energy is reconnecting with the infinite, reconnecting with the infinite light. And now, when I say reconnecting, I mean rediscovering the light that's right here, solving the riddle. And what are the tools to solve the riddle? What's our decoder kit? We call it Torah mitzvah. That's how we solve the riddle of darkness, and we open up and we find the light that's been here the whole time. Okay, now what I want to do is we're going to jump into our text, and we're going to see how this idea, because timing, there's always perfect timing. When we study Kabbalah, it always fits perfectly with the time of year. So where we're up to in our text, which I have here, the Hebrew version. I'm going to share the English version, but I'm going to open it up for myself. We are doing chapter 28. We're starting chapter 28 today. This is what chapter 28 looks like. Starts from up there, and it goes till down here. That's the summary. The kits are the summary. So this block of text, I don't know that we're going to do the whole thing today, but we're going to start this chapter 28. In Hebrew, 28 is koach, chavches, koach, which means strength. So today, we're going to strengthen ourselves, koach, energy, vitality, by studying these ideas. And they connect perfectly with the Rosh Hashanah theme. The idea of what happens at the moment of creation, there's a need for a tzimtzum, at least for relative to us, some sort of concealment. But to God, there's never a concealment. there's always infinite presence, always infinite light. God does not get distracted by his own simpson. That's for us. There's no darkness, so to speak, for God himself. So let me share my screen with you. Give me a moment. Again, jump in. While I pull up the file and open it up and get it to the right page, feel free, please, to jump in with any questions or comments that you've had so far. Don't be bashful. Jump right in if you have something. It's also okay if we have a moment of silence also. Moment of silence. Not that way, but you know. All right, here we go. Chapter 28. Here we go. So in the previous chapter we talked about the interplay between light and darkness. How first there's infinite light, and then there's darkness, concealment, and then the light reemerges for creation, and then there's more darkness, and then there's more light, and there's always this ebb and flow of light and darkness and light, and they work together, even though they're opposites. You know, revelation and concealment are opposites. Nonetheless, they work together. But in chapter 28, he says, all of that exists from the point of creation and downward. Well, what about preceding creation? Here we go. All of this, here we go, look at this. All of this progression, the simpson, the contraction, concealment, the point of revelation of light afterwards, of a limited light, all of this, the entire conversation, is relevant only where there is a flow from the atzmos, the essence. Atzmos is essence. From the essence of the Ein Sof light, from the essence of the infinite light, enabling it to serve as a general source for the hishtalshelus, for the evolution of creation of the worlds. And their creation from nothing to something. It's a little bit of a complicated sentence. I wish the translators would have translated more of the Hebrew words and not left them in the original. We have tzimtzum, atzmos, ein sof, and hishtalshelus that are not translated. It is what it is, but let me just tell you in English what the sentence is saying. Okay? The entire conversation about contraction and darkness and light reemerging, all of that stuff is only relevant once we assume that the world will be created. Right? Once we're talking about the creation of a world, or worlds, plural, then you need a tzimtzum, a contraction, then you need a point of light that emerges after the contraction to infuse life within the space. All of that stuff is post-decision or post-point in time of let's create a world. The implication is that prior to that decision to create, there's no concealment. Even after, there's no real concealment, as I just said, but certainly before that, there's no concealment, there's no darkness, there's no nothing. It's just God and his infinite light. It's only when God decides to create a finite world, now you need to get involved in simpson, in contraction. Let's jump back in. For it to be a general source, there first had to be a contraction, a concealment of the light of Atzmos, the light of the essence, which is separate and elevated out of all proportion to Hishtalshelut. The translation, I have not looked at this translation. I prepare in the Hebrew. It's a little bit bulky right here. In other words, in order for the infinite light to be a source for finite being, there has to be a concealment and contraction of the infinite light. Because the infinite light on its own is completely beyond the creation that will ensue. In other words, infinite is infinitely beyond the finite being of creation. Therefore, to go from infinite to finite requires the tzimtzum, at least for us, right? I hope this is making sense. He gives an example here. This has been illustrated above. In other words, we did this before, earlier in this text, by the analogy of a mashpia Man, we're getting killed with the Hebrew here. Of a teacher who, I need to say my own words here, even though it's going to be confusing. Okay, let me start again. This has been illustrated above by the analogy of a teacher, the type of teacher that is infinitely greater or much greater than the makabel, than the recipient, than the student, and must therefore contract the essence of his light or her light, the teacher's light, leaving only a single minimal point. Let me stop sharing for a second. We gave this example before. The example was that when you have a teacher, not just a little bit smarter than the student, but the teacher is vastly wiser and smarter and more brilliant than the student. In order for the teacher to teach that student, the teacher has to remove all of the brilliance and start again from the perspective of the student. What does the student know? Where are they at? What can I teach them? Not what do I know? Because what do I know is way too much light for the vessel, for the container of the mind of the student. The example that I gave when we did this last time, this must have been, I don't know, like a month or two ago. The example that I gave was Albert Einstein teaching fifth graders science. Albert Einstein, yeah, fifth grade teacher calls in sick one morning. Al, we need you here in the school, in the elementary school. Can you come in? Can you sub? He's, sure, why not? Boom. If Albert Einstein rolls in like AE himself, that's what we used to call him back in the day. Albert Einstein, AE. Right? If Albert Einstein rolls in, right, with all his, like, you know, Big Al, like, energy, he's like, yeah, this is like all the stuff, all the physics, all the science, all the theories, all the calculations, and he puts it all out there for the fifth graders. Yeah. That's going to be a very confused fifth grade class. They are not going to learn a thing. On the contrary, their brains are going to be a little bit sore. They're going to be a little bit, right? Not only will nothing go in to their minds, it's going to actually confuse them more than when they started. Because when they started, they weren't confused. Now they're going to be confused. And they're probably not going to be happy about this experience. So what does Albert Einstein need to do if he wishes to pull this off successfully? He needs to forget what he knows. Or at least in the moment, push it all the way to the side. And start again with a blank slate. What do they know? What do they need to know? And how can I tell them that in a way that's effective? Start in them, not in himself. Are you with me on this? He has to start on their terms, not on his terms. Any good teacher knows the same thing. I'm giving a dramatic example, obviously, but any good teacher knows the same thing. You're not teaching on your terms. You're teaching on the student's terms. You're teaching on their terms. So you take, the first step, therefore, is, it's not about you. Take all your brilliance, all your wisdom, all your ideas, push them aside. You might come back to it later, that's fine, but for right now, push it aside. Blank slate, empty space, empty chalkboard. What idea do you want to convey? One idea. What's the point? What do you want your students to walk away with at the end of that lesson? And not saying, wow, my teacher is brilliant, I have no idea what he or she said. That's not what you want. That's an ego trip, but that's not teaching. Right? What do you want your students to walk away with? So that is the process of simpson and nakuda. You start off with all this light, too much light, simpson, contraction, wipe it away, get rid of it. Not that you forget everything that you know, it's still there, but in the moment you're not working with it, accessing it. Instead, you start with an empty slate, a blank slate, empty space, and now you from what you know, obviously you summon forth one nakuda, one point. What do you want to teach? What is your objective? What's the point of this lesson? You have, how long are periods at school? 45 minutes, 55 minutes, an hour? I feel like I can ask people here. Whatever. One second. Leah. Yeah, how long are periods in school? 55 minutes. Okay. So in our kids' school, it's 55 minutes. 55 minutes. You have 55 minutes. What do you want the students to walk away with? What's the point? If you can't answer that question, if you can't give the elevator pitch, simpson again. You got to start again. Wipe it all away again. Start again. What's the point? What is the point? Don't tell me 1,000 points. What's the point? What skills are you transmitting or teaching? What ideas? What's the point? What's the nakuda? It's got to be a point. And then from there, you build it up. You build it out. You build out your lesson. Obviously, your lesson is not one line, but one line drives the lesson that you then build out. So you have, again, I'm just going to use my hands as a symbol of the light and the darkness interplay. You start off with a lot of light, a lot of ideas, then you contract it, wipe it away, so now you have empty space, like an empty chalkboard. Remember blackboards? Yeah? Kind of have one behind me. No, that is not you actually have a chalkboard. We have another wall that has chalkboard paint on it, but that's not this wall. Nope. Anyway, getting back to it. So you start off with a lot of light. The teacher does. Simpson, get rid of it. Blank space. Summon forth the nakuda, the point. So now we have the re-emergence of a single point of light. Build out that light, right? Create your lesson. You have 55 minutes. You can't just say one line. They're going to be like, okay, 54 and a half minutes. No. What else are you teaching? So you have to build it out. How are you going to convey that? How are you going to get that across? Right? Experiments, examples, whatever subject you're teaching. Building skills, etc. And then you have that built out, and at the end of that lesson, you're going to tell them, so what's the point? And you're going to summarize it. You're going to get back to a single point. So you have light, darkness, this interplay, big, small, right? This contraction, expansion, light, darkness, and that's how it rolls out. But all of this, he says, all of this is as you're teaching. But if you never had to teach, right? If you never had to teach, it looks like our chalkboard is being erased right now as we speak. We do a weekly thing for the kids. All right, but if you never had to teach, yeah, you wouldn't need to do it simpson. You wouldn't need to do a contraction. You could just keep all the ideas in your head as they were. You don't need it simpson if you're not teaching. And that's what he says right here. Let me share my screen with you once again. Let's get back to our text. Similarly, so just like it is with the teacher, that the teacher has to contract the essence of the light, leaving only a single minimal point in order to teach, the same thing is true above. Similarly, concerning the essential being of the Ein Sof light, the infinite light, there must first be a contraction, simpson, of the essential light of Atzmos, of the essence light, leaving only a single point, which can be a source of Hishtalshalut, which means the evolution of the world. So again, you had infinite light. At least from our perspective, there has to be a simpson, a withdrawal, leaving only a single point from which it can be built out, from which creation can be built out, but in its finite space. Even then, even with this single point of light, the point is still concealed. And from it is drawn the kav, which is a revelation. So even after the concealment, and you have the first point of light, that light is also concealed relative to revelation, and only then, afterwards, does it expand, and when it expands, it's known as the kav, the line that moves forth, and then you have again revelation, and then you have more concealment and revelation, and it ebbs and flows like that. Let's continue inside. This is the meaning of the teaching. Like the creation of the world. First there was first darkness, and then light. Again, let's look at this line again. This is a very important line. Like the creation of the world. Hold on 1 second. What's like the creation of the world? The Jewish day starts at night. Right? Rosh Hashanah begins Friday night at sunset, I said. Shabbat begins Friday night at sunset. The Jewish day starts at night. Why? Because the day follows the pattern of creation, like the creation of the world, where there was first darkness and then light. That's the way it works. Right? So the pattern of time, evening and morning, Jewish time follows the pattern of creation itself on an energy level. First darkness, which is simpson, contraction, and then light, revelation of God's light. So again, in order to create a world, first you have to have the simpson, the concealment. You have to move away the infinite light, and then you can have the finite light. So he says, yeah, that only works with creation. When you need creation, then you have to have first darkness and then light. But beyond creation, there's only light. So he says, light, the creation of the world, refers specifically to the time when God wanted to transmit. To be a mashpia, to be a giver, a teacher, a communicator, by means of a leap, a dilug, across an incomparable chasm from above to below. Is it chasm or chasm? How do we pronounce it? What do we think? Who's got it?
Chasm.
Chasm? Okay, so we'll go chasm. So when God wants to transmit, when God wants to create, when God wants to be a mashpia, a giver, a beneficiary, in a way of a quantum leap, across an incomparable chasm from above to below, then there must be first darkness. Then there must first be darkness, i.e. concealment and simpson. And then the residual point in the revelation of the Kav emerges from that. So that's what the statement of our, that's the deeper meaning of this phrase of our sages. Like the creation of the world, there was first darkness and then light. What does that mean? Yeah, it's true. It's a true statement. In the creation of the world, there was first darkness and light. But what does it mean on a deeper level? You only need darkness first when you're creating a world. You only need a simpson of your ideas when you're teaching students. If you're not teaching, you can keep all the ideas in your head. If you're not creating, if you're God and you're not creating, then you just keep the infinite light. The infinite rolls on. Infinite light rolls on. You don't need that simpson. So the point is like this. The emergence of darkness as the origin point of being is because there's the idea of their emerging being. In other words, when there's a desire for otherness to exist, you first have to have darkness. When there's a desire to teach another, you have to have darkness. Simpson, contraction. So the whole essence of darkness emerges only insofar as one is giving, teaching, transmitting. The same process back inside. The same process occurs from Atzilut, the highest of the four worlds, to Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, the next three worlds. These are the four worlds. Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. The translation is world of emanation, world of creation, world of formation, and world of action. So the same process occurs not just from God's infinite light to the structure of creation, but within creation itself, from one world to the next. Because each world constitutes also light, and the subsequent world constitutes, well, each world evolves into the next, kind of like the flow of teacher to student, right? Giver, receiver. Benefactor, beneficiary, right? It's giver, recipient. So he says the same occurs not just from the essence to creation, but within creation itself, all of the stops along the way. From emanation to creation. From creation to formation. From formation to action. Each and every world, there has to be a tzimtzum. There must first be tzimtzum and concealment. You can't move from one world to the next without first hiding the light and then reimagining it on a lower level. Only then is the light revealed in these three worlds. You cannot move from one world to the next without a tzimtzum in between. And again, the point is that you only need simpson when you're moving from one world to the next. If you're staying within one world, you don't need a simpson. If you're staying inside the essence, you don't need simpson. Simpson, that darkness, simpson, is only necessary insofar as you're trying to move something forward, insofar as you're trying to move something into the next step down, so to speak. This concealment between the worlds is referred to as the parsa, or curtain. I love that terminology. It's so beautiful. It says there's a curtain between each of the four worlds. Well, there would be three curtains for four worlds. So you have the world of Atzilut, the highest world. Oh, we did this last week. I had not an image of the worlds, but whatever. I made a sheet. I wonder if I have it. Let's see if I have it somewhere. And the sheet depicted the four worlds. Kabbalah map of the cosmos. I do have it. Okay. So here's what I'd like to do. Share my screen with you one more time. One second. Let me share very quickly this idea. It's very important that we have these ideas clear as we can. Remember, we're supposed to study Kabbalah in a way that makes sense. Okay, here we go. This was the image that I showed you last week. Well, there are other pages to this. We have the 10 Sfirot. We have the 10 Sfirot as depicted in a world. I mean, this is not exactly how it looks, obviously, but just a depiction. And then we have, the next page was the four worlds. And what he's saying now is, not only is there a simpson, you can see my hand moving around the screen, not only is there a simpson from beyond, right, the essence, into this entire schematic of creation, but within creation itself, moving from one world to the next world, moving from emanation to creation, or creation to formation, or formation to action, moving from one to the next requires a simpson in between. So it and the language he's using now, the language of a curtain. So think about a curtain in your home. So why do you have a curtain in your home? You have a living room. You have windows in your living room, and you have curtains in your living room windows on the inside. What's the purpose of the curtain? So there's privacy, but let's understand it vis-a-vis the light, right? I guess it's the same thing for privacy, right? It's about the light coming in. A curtain screens the light to make sure that not all the light comes in. Now maybe you have, there's different types of opacity. There's different types of curtains. Some curtains do a good job in blocking all of the light. Some block some of the light, but allow some of the light to come through. So the same thing is true when it comes to the evolution of the worlds. To go from the big light of Atzilot to the lesser light of Bria, you need a curtain, a screen, to screen out some of that light. And to go from the light of Bria to the lower light of the world of Yetzirah, again, requires another filter, another curtain. Anyway, this is just terminology that Kabbalah uses that I think is fascinating to see in context. All right, let's get back to our text. Let me share with you, once again, our book. Where is it? There it is. Okay. And he has a bunch of sources here at the end of this paragraph where this topic is explored at length. Okay, let's go. The same process back inside. So we talked about the screening process, the tzimtzum, that is only required when you want to step down, you need a tzimtzum. If you're inside yourself, you don't need tzimtzum. The same process recurs as Atzilut, the world of emanation, serves as an intermediary between God, the emanator, and creation. So this is not as Atzilut evolves into Bria, and Bria evolves into Yetzirah, and Yetzirah into Asiya, but this is as Atzilut, the world of emanation, is the bridge between the emanator and creation itself. First, the light of the Atzmos of God, the light of the essence of God is concealed, leaving only a single point, the point of Chachma, which is the Yod of God's name Havaya, the potentiality of all that can be revealed, but it is still concealed and becomes revealed only afterward in Bina, which is the letter Hey, as mentioned previously. So we have the idea of the simpson, contraction, which creates only a single point of light, which is the yud, which is the single point, and then the subsequent expansion of the line of the kav, which is kind of like the hey, the expansion of the light. But again, we have a darkness, we have light, the original light, then a darkness, and then another light on a lower level, and that's how it's understood in the student, or how it expands in the recipient vis-a-vis creation itself. So this occurs from the essence to creation. This occurs within creation itself. It occurs on every single level. The above process of concealment, followed by revelation, relates to levels which are a source of the worlds. And now he circles back to the whole point of this paragraph. Right? All of this process of light, concealment, lower light, all of that is only insofar as there's a desire to create the worlds, or to be a source for the worlds. But before the worlds were created, there was only God and His name. There was only the revelation of the essence of the Ein Sof light as He truly is, before there arose the concept of transmission and drawing down from His essential being. In other words, as I said before, there's one single point to this paragraph, to this chapter, and that is that the entire function of simpson is only for the other. It's only for the emergence of the other. The entire process of simpson for a teacher is only for the student, but not for the teacher, him or herself. You don't need a simpson to know what you know. You don't need a simpson to be God alone and not have creation. To not have creation, you don't need a simpson. Right? There was only, before creation, there was only the revelation of the atmos of the Ein Sof light as He truly is, before there arose the concept of transmission and drawing down from His essential being. This is like the original light, which filled the entirety of what is now the void and empty space. You only have the original light before the tzimtzum, and you only need it as long as you don't have the desire for creation. The Eitz Chaim, which is a book of Kabbalah written by Rabbi Chaim Vital, based on the teachings of the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Eitz Chaim states it thus. This is how he puts it. Check this out. The simple supernal light, right? That's God's infinite pure light, filled all of existence before there arose in His will, as it were, the desire to create. So before the desire to create, there's no darkness, there's no tzimtzum. All right, this concludes the chapter. Let's read the summary. I don't usually do this, but I think here it might be helpful. To transmit, in other words, in order to move something forward, there must first be tzimtzum, or downward, there must first be tzimtzum and concealment. Examples from the essence of the Ein Sof light, from Atzilut to the worlds of Bria Tzir Asiya, from God the emanator to the created beings. For every time you're stepping down into a drastically lower space, there needs to be a tzimtzum and concealment. However, there was no concealment before the world was created. Before the world was created, as the Eitz Chaim says, the simple supernal light filled all of existence before there arose in His will, as it were, the desire to create. So before creation, all you have is pure light. So, in very simple terms, you go cycling back to the example of a teacher. When you're teaching, before you teach, you have to take away all of the ideas and start again from scratch. What do I want my students to learn? What do I want them to walk away with? You have to put yourself in the mind of the student and really connect with them and create a lesson that works with their capacity to understand. But if you're not teaching, if it's just you can keep all of the brilliant thoughts in your mind, and you can indulge in your learning and your own wisdom, tzimtzum free, without any concealment. No darkness, no concealment, no contraction. So what's the message? What's the message for the world itself? What's the cosmic message? The entire interplay, light, then darkness, then light, then darkness, that entire discussion only comes into play the moment God decides to create. But before creation, before the desire to create, there's only light. And here's where we're going with this. And therefore, even after the desire to create, to God, there's still only light. And the darkness is not darkness, and the subsequent light is also not light. In other words, The darkness doesn't conceal from God, because like the author of the Riddle doesn't. And the subsequent light, that's the finite light that emerges after that darkness, to God is not light, because God knows the infinite light, not this finite light. God knows that also, but that's not the light relative to God's infinite light. So the darkness is not darkness, the light is not light, it's just infinite. So what we're creating now are two realities. Our reality and God before creation's reality. Our reality is there was light, and then there was darkness, and then there's finite light, all that stuff. To God before creation, it's not complicated. It's just God. It's just God. And here's the ultimate magic trick. It's still, or the secret, it's still only God. It's still only God. All of that stuff is our perception. It's to allow us to exist in our own minds. Allow us to exist in our own consciousness. But in reality, there's only one truth. One singular truth that never changed. And that is the essence of God. Our job, getting back to how I started this class, our job is to bring that truth out into the physical world, into the world that relies on concealment, to bring the truth and the revelation of the infinite light in this world, lest you think that when you open up the floodgates of that light, it's going to destroy the contours of physical reality. It's going to melt the matrix. It's going to undo the fabric of existence. The Kabbalists assure us, don't worry, this is the design. Before Tzimtzum, it precluded the possibility for finite existence. Post-Tzimtzum, post-concealment, yeah, we can have both. We can have the limited space with the infinite energy. And so, my friends, I want to conclude with the following suggestion. As we prepare ourselves for Rosh Hashanah, and I used this as an example before, but now I want to focus on it as we conclude and we close out today's session. Think of something. Think of a resolution that would represent a lot of energy, a lot of light in your life. And then think about how you can integrate that light into your, I'm not saying this in a negative way, but in an ordinary life. In other words, to make a resolution that we're going to be completely transformed this year, to be completely different people, to be completely out of the box, living in heaven with the infinite light, I say that it's probably not going to be sustainable. Rather, think of a resolution for the new year. New Year's resolution. Jewish New Year's resolution is not like gyms and whatnot. This is like spiritual stuff. So think of a Jewish, Kabbalistic New Year's resolution. That's all about how can I bring more energy, a little bit of the infinite light into my again, I'm not saying this in a negative way, but ordinary, like day-to-day, normative life. To do a little bit more that touches on the infinite inside the structure that I currently inhabit. Because to change my entire structure, that's probably not going to be sustainable. Even if it works the first few days or first few weeks of the year, it's probably not going to be sustainable. Let's find something, a resolution. Even something like, we created these tzedakah boxes for the dinner swag. By the way, if you didn't get one and you want one, happy to share. So just let me know. We also created shot glasses that say, give Torah learning a shot. I cannot help myself. I cannot. It's like I can't. I can't, and I probably won't. So you're stuck with me. It is what it is. Coffee Cup says we're always up for learning. Yeah, caffeine. And the shot glass says give Torah learning a shot. What are you going to do? It is what it is. Even something as simple as integrating, giving tzedakah, putting a few pennies or a few nickels or dimes or a quarter, whatever it is, some change, into a tzedakah box every single day, other than Shabbat and the holidays. where we don't handle money. But every weekday, every mundane, regular weekday, to put a little tzedakah in the morning is transformative. Why? Because it touches on, it's a mitzvah. Tzedakah is a mitzvah. Giving every day tzedakah is a mitzvah. We give a little bit, by the way. I said not on Shabbos, so we give a double before Shabbat when we light the candles to count for the next day. So, but we don't do it on the holy days themselves. This is taking a mitzvah, which is infinite light stuff, but integrated in our daily routine. So it's not, meditating and fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. Not it's got to be sustainable. We're talking about infinite light, but in finite spaces, in sustainable spaces. That's the message of today. How do we connect Rosh Hashanah, right? How do we take the infinite light and integrate it into the finite spaces, into the normative, everyday spaces of our lives? This is one example. Do any example. Anyway, if you need examples, if you need suggestions, call me, text me, email me. I'm happy to give suggestions. You can tell me specifically what you had in mind, what you were thinking, and I can help, formulate a plan or, give suggestions and help. But in general, here's the concept. Rosh Hashanah, day number 6 of creation, infinite light, in the finite space. That's our job. That's why it's a big deal. And that's what we celebrate. And that's what we resolve. So let's make this year count. Every year counts, but let's really infuse ourselves. Let's really be present this Rosh Hashanah this year. Let's resolve to bring the light into the world. And by the way, when the infinite light is fully returned, well, it never went anywhere, so that's a wrong term. When it's fully realized in this world, that constitutes Mashiach, a perfect world, a world that recognizes its truth. Automatically, there's no fighting, there's no hunger, there's none of the drama, none of the craziness, none of the negativity is around once we operate, once the truth is realized for all to see. And that is the goal of Rosh Hashanah. This is the day of the beginning of God's works, a remembrance of the first day, not the first day, but the day that the work began. Let's finish it off. Let's get the job done. Let's make it happen. Let's flood the world in its finite spaces with the infinite light. Every one of us, we can do small actions that make a big difference. L'chaim. Empty shot glasses. L'chaim. Turn the farbrengen. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful new year. Let's make this year count. Thank you for joining me for Kabbalah Coffee. Hope you enjoyed. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Shana Tova Umetuka. Happy and healthy, sweet new year. And this year, we pray for a lot of health, a lot of good health, which will lead to the happiness and the sweetness. No challenges, we ask. I know we grow through challenges, but God can figure out a way that we can grow without the challenges also. So let it be sweet and smooth, and only the light, no filter. Pure light, only goodness. Sorry?
The same for you.
Amen. Thank you.
Yes, you too.
Thank you. Great to see everybody. Bye, Alex. Bye, Mariana. Bye, Joy. Bye, Leonora. Bye. We'll see you all. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for the invitation the other day, but we're so late and we couldn't wait.
I'll share the video so you can watch it anytime. It was really beautiful. So happy to share. Thank you
All
right.
much.
Take care. We'll see you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.